Hello, everybody. Welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for stopping by. So we're here looking at those of you studying your diploma. We are looking at Catalunya in northeast Spain, and we're focusing on Priorat and Montsant. We're going to be on part 2 here, looking at the growing environment and grape growing. Any questions, comments, please put them in the comments section below this video. Thank you. Great to hear from you. So let's start looking at the growing environment here in Priorat. So first of all, what about its climate? Generally, we say that Priorat has a warm continental climate. The summers are hot, but with a high diurnal range giving these cooler nights. The winters are quite cold, and we can get spring frosts that can actually be an issue in this neck of the woods. Rainfall is typically fairly low, about 500 to 600 millimeters per year, but most of that falls as heavy rain, as rain in storms during the winter and spring. The summers remain very dry in this location. Irrigation, though, is permitted in the driest years, and certainly, as always, for the establishment of new vineyards to get them going. Of course, young vines need that water supply to grow in those early stages. Okay, so topography of this landscape. So the region is a very interesting part of Catalunya. It is dominated by mountains, which give you the altitude and also offer protection. So to the north of Priorat, we have the Serra de Montsant. Of course, there is a DO named after this mountain. This really gives you the protection from the cold winds from the north. So that's a nice protective barrier to the northern part of Priorat. To the south is the Serra de la Briera, as you'll see here. Now, this is in fact a slightly smaller mountain range, which gives you protection from the Mediterranean. So you've actually got that continentality sitting in the middle, which is protected from the north and the south. It's a really quite strategic and useful location here for the topography. And then through the middle of these two mountain ranges runs the river. So this is the river Suriana, excuse me, the Suriana. Now, this is what winds through this area, and it's produced, this river has actually carved through many valleys, as you'll see in the picture in this background. I quite love this picture. With sort of a church monastery in the foreground here. And because you have a river cutting through the middle of this area, you're therefore going to get aspect, because you've got slopes that flank the river, and you've got altitudes of around 100 to 750 meters. And of course, a varying amount of aspects, including north facing, which many see important in this area. The overall topography here is extremely rugged and rustic. And although the DOQ Priorat covers around 17,600 hectares, there's only just over 2,000 hectares, as mentioned in the previous video under vine. So we are talking about a low number today, and it's much lower than the pre-phylloxera number of this area. So many vineyards are found because of the rugged, undulating landscape. Many are found on what we call costas, which are slopes in English. They range in gradient from around sort of a meager 5%, but up to a quite dramatic 60% around the region. Here you'll see this is probably at about 30, 35, this one, still very, very steep. Okay, let's have a look at one of these Google Earth videos for Priorat and Montsant. So focusing on Priorat, first of all, there's Catalunya outlined in white. Priorat, the DOQ in the southwest of around 2,000 hectares, and 110 wineries, sits in this wonderful area with a warm continental climate. We're talking around 500 to 600 millimeters of rain in this very famous area. Now, in the north, we have a mountain range called the Serra do Montsant. Take a look at that bit closer. This is quite a key mountain range as it actually protects from the northerly cold winds. And in the south, we have the Serra de la Breria, and that protects from the Mediterranean influence that comes off from the south. Through the middle, we have the Suriana River, which is a lovely winding river that actually cuts a lot of valleys of different types of altitudes. So that's why we have around 100 to 750 meters with wonderful slopes, costas, and bush vines found on those. Around the whole area, almost encompassing it, is Montsant d'Eu, about 1,900 hectares, 60 wineries in play here, famous for cooperatives at less extreme altitude, about 300 to 700 meters. The geology here, now I've covered geology a little bit in the introduction to Catalunya, but there's no harm, of course, going through this again. The soils across this area, including Montsant, are actually quite varied. Largely, they are stony, large stony soils with some outcrops of clay. The most common soil, though, with that kind of stoniness is the Licorella slate soils, decomposing slate soils. They are thin, fracturing, fragmented rocks which lack distinctly in nutrients, but do have some quite available minerals, such as mica, for example, which reflects both light and heat back onto the vines. You can typically take a picture of a Priorat vineyard in the height of the summer day on the ground, take the picture, and you'll see that the soil is actually sparkling, certainly with that heat that is rising off from the soil. Now, the bedrock of slate, which sits quite quickly below the subsoil, actually splits into quite commonly vertical layers. And that means that vine roots can grow deep in search of the limited water. They work through the available fractures that one finds in those bedrocks. The low nutrient and water levels lead to, of course, exceptionally low yields per vine, and especially because there's quite a lot of old bush vines in the area. We'll find that we have these narrow terraces in place, typically those that will follow the contour of the land. So this is a common feature. It helps reduce soil erosion because you have a nice flat terrace, so it's not all surface runoff, and it allows rainwater to better infiltrate the soil, therefore into the roots in this area that distinctly lacks rainfall. In neither case can we use machines. So we can't use machines on the costas or the terraces because it is very difficult to get machinery up at these areas. So typically we find work being done throughout the year and at harvest by hand. And finally here, the low nutrient and water levels leads to exceptionally low yields, as we mentioned. And we have these old vineyards generally planted to low density bush vines like in your picture just there. Of course, new vineyards, there are different options available today. So you might see the vertical shoot positioned trellised styles. So things like cordons and guillots. But really, we tend to have more over these bush vines. And maybe some of these might be trellised, but typically they are head trained, spur pruned. The average yields can be as little as 5 hectoliters per hectare, although the maximum is 39 hectoliters per hectare. It doesn't technically get to that level because of the very low nutrients and low vigor in this area. Small yields have an implication, of course, on production costs. And of course, the price of wines reflect that. You will typically find the wines here being around sort of mid and high priced and with many examples being premium and some even super premium. Okay, so that brings me to the conclusion of this video looking at geology, the climate, the growing environment, and grape growing. The next video is another free video that's on the key grape varieties found here in Priorat. Please do join me for that. If you are really enjoying this series and you wish to watch every video, you'll need to go and sign up. There is a little website down here at the bottom, that's winewithjimmy.com, which is my online portal, which has really a huge volume of exclusive videos to help you with your understanding of wine and, of course, for your studies. Lots of extra resources like maps, questions, and flashcards can be found there too. So thank you very much. Any comments again, please do get in touch. And if you do find yourself in the United Kingdom, please come and say hi for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.